I'm Grace. I can hear him, by the way.
Wait, what? We're wearing this getup because we're in our tiny house on wheels, which is not where we live anymore because we're on the tail end of season 2 of this TV season, and that means that we have finished our big house and we live there now with our 2 cats and our 2 kids.
Yeah. So if you've been following us on YouTube or you're a Patreon supporter, it's like no big news for you. But if all you know is us from past conferences or from our first season of Home Diagnosis,
the YouTube channel.
Well, I mean, if people have been watching on the YouTube channel, they know we're in the big house now. Yeah, you might think that we're still living here, but we have moved out of 200 square feet and into
3,000 square feet. 800 of which is a training center / recording studio / dance studio / slumber party room.
Multi-purpose.
So welcome to the secret screening. No one else has seen the stuff that we're about to show you. And so we're like really excited to do this kind of behind the scenes stuff. Some of this you can see in bits and pieces on our YouTube channel because we've been trying to kind of get the word out about this season. As you may know, there has never been a television series made about the science of homes. And you can call it building science, you could call it energy efficiency, you could call it whatever you want. And the fact is that it just never happened. And I just want to make sure that everybody's clear. I said this at the last in-person conference where we all met up. I believe that was Chicago. And we did a screening there. Grace was not there, but the secret ingredient that made this possible is her, is not me. There's lots of white men who are very technically savvy with this stuff. Many of you are watching. What we did not have was somebody who understands the film industry and how to put together a production and how to shop that to a distributor to put it onto actual networks to get it seen by actual people. So
my skills came in very complimentary. And I missed the last conference because I had just had our second daughter. And now we are actually,
I think that's so weird how pregnant women always want to actually show you. Just you can just tell them.
Yeah. So exciting stuff is happening for us. We're expanding our family. We're expanding this season, and we're really excited to share season 2 with you, which will be coming out. We're wrapping it up at the end of the year because pandemic times, right, has changed things. In every episode, we're also trying to go into another person's house to kind of find problems and then present solutions in the build. And suddenly we couldn't go into other people's homes with a film crew. So it kind of halted things, and we really had to rethink how we were going to structure season 2. And at the same time, kind of just prior to the pandemic, the fall before the March of the pandemic, the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation, which is a huge science backer, came on board and really helped open our mind to the science of homes and opened up lots of connections to just amazing scientists all over the world who are working on this. And anyhow, that's kind of been our pivot and our practice.
And by the way, so when Grace says the science of homes, she means the expanded version, which we have not been talking about at this conference or any conference anywhere in the world, really, until the last couple of years because of this one project that I hope you saw the presentation on. If you did not catch it, it's recorded, so you can see it, but we did a presentation on what's called the Indoor Chemistry and Microbiology of Homes is the name of the session.
Yeah, and for short, we like to call it Home Chem. So let's jump in.
Just real quick so that you know what we're about to get into. If you want to see more, we've got over 500 videos on our YouTube channel, many of which are highly technical, most of which are very long. This is going to be an hour-long screening. A typical video that we put out that I'm really proud of is going to be as long as one of the episodes that we're going to put out, which is 26 minutes. So you can see all kinds of different stuff on the channel, which looks like this. It's called Home Performance. Please do check it out. Please do subscribe. Please tell your friends. It's free to see that stuff. And we're going to let you know how you can get more involved with the show. And we would love to have you involved in making our show because we have 18 sponsors involved in making Home Diagnosis. And that's great. We are so grateful for them.
Yes.
However, We also want to make sure that this does not, at any point, turn into a commercial for building products. And our sponsors know that. That's really important. Number one, we're on PBS specifically because we can't mention brands, partly. People trust it as an educational resource.
Mm-hmm.
So in order to make sure that we are beholden to you, the home performance cult members, which we're part of as well, we want to make sure that we have a direct line of communication with you. And our very first Patreon supporter, Scott Marner, I think is on this Zoom call right now.
And it was at the last presentation.
I was at the presentation in Chicago, and we opened up our membership. Right now, I'll just let everybody know we have 31 supporters, most of whom are not you. They're not in the professional space. We would love to have you guys be there. So please do consider joining that to help us make the show, to help us make the YouTube videos, and make sure that it's always referring back to a touchstone that is actual people who are in this industry. Because if you're not there, we just say whatever we know at the time, which is like largely nowadays introduced to us by our product partners, who are these giant corporations who, like, you know, they have their perspective. Let's just be perfectly honest about that, right? So we want to make sure that this is a show for everyone, especially for the people who do this professionally.
Definitely. So check that out.
Yeah. So just to give you, we're going to give you like little blurbs in between each of the clips that we're going to show you. This, what you're looking at right now, is the actual editing environment that I am working in to edit this show. I edit the show in this tiny house on our computer. This is called Premiere. If you don't work with Adobe products, I highly recommend you try it out. It's like $50 a month and you get the whole thing.
And not a commercial. They're not a sponsor of our show. No. But it has been a really usable software. And also, just in case you're curious, like how this footage comes together, a lot of times we're filming each other. I film Corbett a lot. And then oftentimes we have had, you know, run and gun kind of one-off shooters if we need them. And then when we do our full-blown production, which you'll notice because the pictures just look more beautiful, they sound really good. That's our professional crew that we bring in at $10,000 a day. So this show is not just, you know, made on our YouTube like iPhone camera. We put a lot of time and attention and detail to this because we do want people to take this message seriously. I think one of the things that we have really committed to early on when we came into the building performance world is we noticed that the story was not being told. And specifically, the story was not being told to the boss. And the boss is the homeowner. So that's our goal, is really to get this mainstream to the homeowner and in a way that is understandable. Corbett, sometimes I know it feels like standing in front of a fire hydrant. And that is why I'm here to help translate sometimes and bring it back to, you know, the grounded concepts that, you know, a non-scientist, non-contractor person, but a homeowner, you know, who's dealing with these home headaches.
And a mom.
Yeah, can really understand.
Right. So to give you a gist of the basics of what we're talking about, in case you're not clear on what this season is about, here is the first little, what we call quick tip. And this is in episode 1 of the new season.
Most people are familiar with home inspections. An inspector's job is to investigate the static parts of the building, things built into the home. Construction details, HVAC equipment, type and age, shape and condition of the structure.
And even when an inspection points out all the safety or durability hazards that should be improved, it can only go so far because it's all about the static stuff that can be seen. Home performance is about dynamics, things that change and flow. To investigate those things, how the house feels, smells, and sounds when it's dynamically working, you need performance testing.
Every home is a system, just like a body. You can't see your heart, but you know it's there. And a doctor can use a blood pressure to measure your heart's performance. The diagnostic tools we use in home diagnosis help us find the invisible heat, the invisible air, the invisible moisture, and pollutants that define your home's performance.
So look around you. What might seem like a hodgepodge of furniture and products is actually an interacting, interdependent system of invisible dynamics that can be tested and tuned. Stop guessing. Proof is possible. Ask for it.
Okay, so I hope you noticed that the Building Performance Association is on the sponsor reel of our show. They were a founding sponsor of this television series, which is very important, almost as important as having you involved personally. And then the other thing that I'd just like to point out is that the way that we're trying to couch this is as a science show that's also a home show. And so as an example, like we originally thought that this was going to be a show that might be on HGTV,
Right.
until we realized what the show actually says. Like the subliminal message of the show is if you're not testing stuff that you're doing to houses, it's crap. Like it doesn't make any sense. It's nonsense.
And an interesting, just kind of insider television industry thing. Producers and distributors in the cable world like to be on one side of that fence or the other. And
As far as the science or the house.
right.
So it's called head and heart.
Yes, exactly. So we really bring those two things together, because if you understand these concepts, you understand too that it's your family, it's your health, it's your home, it is your heart 100%. And again, this is one of the reasons why we have found a home in the public TV realm and in the YouTube realm, because I believe viewers are smarter than producers and cable companies give them credit for. And really, we are bringing these together, these concepts together. By the way, as you're watching this, if you have any questions, feel free to type them into the chat. We are going to address the questions and do a live Q&A at the end.
Yes, and we'll have plenty of time for Q&A. So please, if you have like long questions to ask or challenges to make at how we're phrasing things or talking about things, like please bring it up, because we have really good answers for why we do every single thing in our builds and on the show as well. So just to make sure that everybody's clear, the second thing that we're going to show you here is about our relationship and our show's relationship to energy efficiency.
On Home Diagnosis, you won't hear us talking much about energy efficiency, but we do know a couple of secrets about it. Want to know the secret to powering my tiny lab? Here it is. If I came to visit you, you could unplug your toaster and plug in my entire house. I could then run everything at the same time off that plug. Energy efficiency wasn't our main goal with the Tiny Lab. We set out to make the world's highest performance tiny house on wheels. But by controlling performance, we get energy efficiency as a fantastic byproduct. Seems like you can't have it both ways.
All right. So we have an episode that we just shot the principal footage for, which is all about the sun. We call it universal battery.
Yeah.
And the my reason for wanting to make an episode all about the sun. And by the way, we script everything. Grace and I map out the season. We script all the scripts. Mm-hmm. We produce it. We direct it in the how the story needs to be told. We have a technical director who's in charge of making sure the lights and that continuity and the angles and all that stuff makes sense.
But in a really fancy version, we have a graph that we wrote out on a poster board that's literally taped to the wall.
It's a poster board, which is the same kind of poster board that we used at our first trade show. We're very proud of remembering that. But
it keeps us on task.
Yeah, exactly. And so we wanted to make an entire episode on this only show ever about the science of homes that is about the sun, that has nothing to do with solar power. And that's the kind of conversation that we want to have, is like, we're not against solar panel. Like,
Yeah.
if you sell solar panels, good for you. If you're all about PV, if you're, using electric cars and stuff like that, awesome. Great.
If you've followed our journey with the tiny house, we powered it on solar panels.
But the story is more complicated than people want to believe, and then people are told. Like, our solar panels right now are sitting in my workshop, not plugged into anything, because frankly, the battery bank is a little bit more of a pain than I was originally understanding that it would be. So using it just as a battery backup is what I've got it doing right now when the power goes out. But that is one of those touchstones that normal people, and when I say normal people, I'm capitalizing the N, already know about. So we will not be talking about spray foam insulation. We will not be talking about changing out all your windows. We did not do that on season 1 either. We will not be talking about solar panels, because that's all stuff that people already are thinking about.
Right.
And we just want to try and dig a little deeper.
And the other thing that we really, I hope it came through in that last thing about the byproducts of home performance is all of those things. But marketing to the boss and to the homeowner has been very much about the Band-Aid. It's about this one fix. All you got to do is pay $30,000 to have all your windows replaced in your home, and then you're going to be awesome. You're going to be set. And all of you watching this, no, that's not the answer. And that a home is a system, and you're going to be setting yourselves up for more heartache, and your pocketbook is going to be really, really stretched if you go it at that approach.
Yeah.
So that's why we don't really just focus on one thing. We look at the big picture, the big system, and the sun. It doesn't get much bigger than that, right? And the sun affects your home in so many other ways too. We really wanted to highlight that.
So in the effort to explain thermodynamics and Dewpoint at what is probably targeting, to be really bluntly honest, 5th grade level on public television, like you want to try and explain things so that a 5th grader could get it. We're about to show you the first big chunk that our Patreon members have already seen a bit of over the last couple of days. But this is something I'm very proud of. This is explaining thermodynamics and Dewpoint in 6 minutes and 30 seconds.
And I'm not entirely sure this would have happened had we not had
Gotten
the
trapped on this.
pandemic.
So we can't leave this property anymore because nobody's going to let us into our house with our 8 production crew and all of their cases that were on site somewhere else. So we have these 5 different locations on our property.
Amazing.
And we turned them into this story because we were stuck, because we had limitations, which is also called opportunities.
Yeah.
Heat flow is a constant in the universe. It's always happening. Warmth is going from things that are hot into things that are cold. It's happening around us, it's happening within our homes. In order to understand how to make the heat and keep it there, you need to understand a little bit more about the metrics. And so we use something like this. You can buy a thermometer hygrometer, or if you just go to the store and ask for something that tells you what the temperature and relative humidity is in a space, they're very available for like 20 bucks. This one is a professional model, and it's called a data logger. What this enables someone like me to do is to set this up and get trackable minute to minute or even by the second measurements of temperature and relative humidity, and a third measurement, which is dew point. Dew point's important to understand because the main difference between indoor spaces and outdoor spaces is the huge amount of surface area inside, and dew point is all about the interaction of the air's temperature and humidity with surfaces. So if I want to be able to predict and prevent surfaces becoming wet, because that's my nightmare, then what I would do is understand more about the metrics, which is of course what we're doing on this show. And so we used this to set up in this workshop to start with, because this workshop is the closest thing to an outdoor space that you're going to get. It's not conditioned. In fact, birds can fly in and out of here, and they do all the time. I don't have screens up. It's not insulated, it's not air sealed, and there's no equipment heating or cooling it or drying it. It's shaded, which is nice, and that's something that is not going to account into a graph of the weather that looks like this. So you can see that the temperature goes up in the daytime when the sun comes out, and it goes down again at night. Meanwhile, the relative humidity goes down in the daytime and goes up again at night. tends to be a pretty consistent level of moisture in the air. And so when the temperature goes up, relative humidity goes down. But there's a third measurement in this graph, and that is dew point. The dew point, you can see, is tracking a little bit with both because it's about the relationship of those two things with the surface. So in this space, the graph looks almost identical to the weather graph that we see. My graph is a little bit more detailed because my equipment is a little bit better. I'm able to get minute-to-minute readings instead of just hourly. So this space is a good way to understand the most minimal utilitarian shelter we could have, where we're just trying to keep the rain out, we're trying to keep big animals out of here and people, and we're trying to make sure that wind doesn't blow things around in here. Not very sophisticated. Let's look at a couple other spaces where we're trying to use some of the techniques that we show in home diagnosis to try and harness the power of heat flow. Now, this is the first step towards making a space that's a little easier to condition.
So this is actually one of the original structures on our property. It's the old spring house. And I mean, you couldn't even see it when we got here. It was so overgrown, there was a tree growing out on top of it. So we call it Troll House.
So this troll house has something that the workshop did not. It's called thermal mass. It means it's made out of heavy stuff. That makes it harder to heat up in the morning, and it retains its heat at the end of the day when the sun goes down. If your house is made out of something like solid brick or concrete or stone, then it would have thermal mass, which is a nice thing, but you can see that it's not insulated or air sealed, so it's not really like a house. But it is considerably more controlled than the workshop was, where the workshop can change temperature on a dime and the graph looks very ragged. This space looks a lot more smooth, and you can see even that when the sun comes up in the morning, starts warming it up, but then it moves into shade and it dips right back down, which is something that you would not have seen with the workshop.
So thermal mass is a first step towards controlling your heating and cooling.
Now we're getting closer to a place where you could actually think about living.
Welcome to our build. Now, if you look at the graph for the build, you will see the benefits of air sealing and insulation.
And that's it. Since it's under construction, there's no heating and cooling equipment at work in here. And all you're seeing is the little bit of insulation that's outside the walls. There's not even any in the roof yet. This is how you start to really tamp down on the way that the weather tries to yank your living space around.
But this really isn't real life. So let's go see what real life looks like.
This is the space where we keep our testing equipment and some of our belongings that didn't fit into the tiny lab. Now, this space also has thermal mass.
The thermal mass is an 8-inch concrete slab that's in contact with the ground.
It also, obviously, since you know us, is airtight and insulated, but it has a piece of equipment at work in here.
The magic dehumidifier, which we're gonna get into moisture more in the next episode.
But for right now, you can see this one piece of equipment at work in the graph very clearly. I can use this information to find out if it's doing what it's supposed to be doing, how hard it's working, but we're still not really in real life because you are never gonna have just one piece of equipment at work in your house at any one time.
Now we come to the temperature behavior of a real-life lived-in house,
where we have not just one, but two pieces of equipment that are hopefully working in tandem to tune the space.
We have the HVAC system and a dehumidifier.
And these two things are necessary together because when we were first on tour in this house, we actually refused to park it in the shade because if the HVAC system wasn't calling for cooling, then it wouldn't also dry the space. So we need to have both of these working together so that we can then park the house in the shade where it's gonna be more comfortable.
And if you look at the graph of this house, it's much smoother, right? Except for you got real life. Like for example, the big jump where my daughter left the door open.
Or you forgot to set the dehumidifier back to the level that the baby changed it from the other day, or somebody leaves a window open, somebody leaves a fan on. These things happen, it's okay, but we hope to, in the final episode of this season, show you what looks like almost a perfectly flat line in our big house that we're building.
Using a systems approach is how you can control your own home's temperature behavior.
All right. So, we would love to hear what you think about that. I'm pretty happy with it. I feel like that was like a brilliantly, the amount of like forethought that led us to realize, oh no, we have to script all this stuff so that we can shoot everything on site, which actually is like way easier. I have to tell you, Grace is a film professional. She's an actress and producer by trade. I hate film sets. It is the worst. It's so boring. Or you're exhausted. You're just like, you're there and you have to be on. And by the way, that entire thing that you just saw was not scripted. That was an example of us riffing. The other things that you've seen so far from the show are scripted. Those are the quick tips. But that was just talking.
We have two different sections that we call science riffs and building riffs.
Right. Riffing is like a lot more fun for me than reading, but they're both super exhausting when you have to like look nice and make sure that your hair is nice and that you're not.
Are you in the right wardrobe?
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day,
ready to throw all
down.
wardrobe out.
And by the way, just a funny thing that I always like to point out, when you hear like a moment of perfect silence in a television show or a movie where somebody's like, what that sound is the sound of 30 people standing up against a wall, mouth breathing. That's
it's
like what
room tone.
Being on a set is like. So just to review, so first of all, big shout out, Scott Marner, our #1 Patreon. He was first in, and he's also the biggest supporter that we've had so far up in Illinois. Thank you for being here to watching this.
And the first two will get to stay in the tiny house.
That's right. This is one of the rewards for being a member. And then Brett Singer from Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratories. I hope you won't mind me mentioning him. But he was asking, how do I become a member and help support? Thank you. You go to patreon.com/home diagnosis TV, all one word. So if you guys want to do that, what's that?
Hap Haven's been.
Hap Haven, right? Rock on. Yeah.
Hap,
I mean, we shot one of our episodes from season 1 in Hap's hometown.
Yeah.
So, and he came out and held our baby, who is now 5 years old. Okay. Yeah, mind exploding. So, one of the big things that we also like to give is because, you know, we have our book is called What is our book called?
Overborn's Diagnostic.
Okay, so we have a book. It's all about testing, and it's because we believe that the foundation. So first of all, we're not an industry, right? You know that.
Oh yeah, except no, that's another story.
Yeah.
For
Okay.
Patreon
So home performance is not an industry. Energy efficiency is not an industry. That's not where we are. What we are is the cream of the entire construction industry. That's the people who are at this conference. And the reason that we are the cream of the entire construction industry is because we test. That is the only thing that makes us different. If you think that having more building science knowledge and like reading more books about building science and knowing more about how vapor is supposed to flow in a wall assembly makes you better.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to make you really awesome and great at conference trivia next year when we're all together.
But if you meet up with a builder who is 85 years old, who read all the books that you read were wrong when you read yours, he's got his scientific information, you get your scientific information, and it's just two people with opinions bashing heads against each other.
Right.
Somebody who comes in and has actual test data, which is something that somebody like Hap Haven has helped to pioneer since 1980, and showing people that you don't have to guess about what you're doing in houses. You can prove it.
Right.
That's the whole thing. So if you're not doing that, if you're not like specializing in that, you need to specialize more in that. So in the effort to give people like concrete scientific ways that they can diagnose their own home, we try to build in some tips. Now, you know, if you own a blower door, like there is no replacement for a blower door. Telling people to walk around with a candle and like look at their windows, it would be lame. We're not doing that. But here is an example of something that we are doing to try and get people just thinking about their own home and thinking scientifically about experimenting with it without having to find you first.
Home diagnosis shows that in every home, there's one thing that impacts how it feels, smells, and sounds more than anything else: the skin. Just like your own skin, its job is to keep inside stuff inside and keep out weather and contaminants.
Your home's skin is made of the airtightness and insulation layers. That's usually two different things. And they should usually be touching each other. They should certainly never have big holes in them, but often they do, and we're about to show you how to spot some of them yourself.
Since air leaks right through most insulation, pay attention to air leakage first. You know warm air rises and cool air sinks, so the two most vital places to control air leakage is the top floor ceiling and the bottommost floor. Now, your floor is probably pretty flat, which is a simple shape, but the top floor ceiling, not so simple.
Ever felt hot in a top floor room in summer, even though the lower floors are nice and cool? Chances are it has nothing to do with air conditioning. It's because of holes in the skin of the house over your head.
So take a walk around the top floor and keep your eye out for places where the ceiling height changes from room to room. Wherever this happens, there's probably air leakage and insulation issues. Any ducts that plug into the ceiling are even more likely to leak air since the ductwork is now in the highest point in the home.
The more recessed lights, tray ceilings, dormers, and turrets a home has up top, the more concerned you should be about testing and improving the performance dynamics. Start at the top and all else follows.
All right. I was just remembering, like going back down memory lane. In season 1, the production company that we hired to finish out the season that we shot in places like Philadelphia, where we met with Hap, and in Atlantic City and
Chicago,
and blah blah blah, like different places. Rochester was a very nice company, but they for some reason did not own a teleprompter. And like we own a teleprompter now. We have an app that's $20, and we have a teleprompter that costs us $100.
Yeah, technology has definitely changed.
And so in season 1, if we wanted to do scripted stuff, we would literally have to memorize the script. We would write the script the day of. We would be like, okay, here's what we're going to say. Here's exactly how we should say it. And then we'd memorize it, and then we'd stand in front of the camera and like deliver our lines. And it's so much easier being able to work with a teleprompter. I just want to like,
well, and
again,
cost savings for sure.
Oh yeah, it saves a lot of time. But that like grammar of how to exactly say something is something that I really get a big kick out of. I'm sure that some of you who are trainers do that as well. That like the best soundbite you can come up with. And this is a high pressure version of that when you're paying $10,000 a day. And I know how much that is per minute. Like the money is scrolling in front of my eyes as we're paying that, because everybody who works on the show works for us directly. We own the copyright for the show. And that's why you will be able to see every episode of this season, just like you did with season 1, for free on our YouTube channel, because we get to do whatever we want.
Yeah. So that's a little behind the scenes frustration of Mr. Lunsford. Like, we will do one take and I'll be like, I think we got it. Let's go. No. There's something called editing. We're going to do at least one more.
and I am the editor, and I do appreciate that she like does that. But when we started out, I was just editing episode 1 today, and like we've got so much footage. We're worried about filling up 26 minutes. I've got like, I could fill a 3-hour slot with the stuff that we've got.
But we won't. We'll keep it to 26 minutes.
Yeah, because So I want to say something else, but because we want to give people a taste, we want to leave them wanting more, because you cannot possibly learn enough about physics, chemistry, and microbiology of homes in 26 minutes.
Right.
And we want people to be explicitly clear about that. And we will tell them, like, we would love to talk more about this, but this is a half-hour show. Yeah. Go to our website. And that's where they can do things like find a pro in their local area.
Know how to even find it and like what to look for.
And we literally get emails several times a week, emails and calls. I got a call the other day that was literally a 59-second call, and a woman was like, I need to know how to find somebody in my local area who can do what you do. And I'm like, great, go to our website, go to Find a Pro. And she's like, great, thank you, bam. That's all she wanted to know. So please do go there and see what we're telling people, the SEO, the search terms that they should be using, blower door.
Yep, make sure you've got those in there.
Energy audit, because that's like people are going to search for that. I hate that word, but like whatever.
But a lot of money got put behind those words, and so they're high.
And so this is, just to reiterate again, why we're on PBS. If we were on a network, like let's just pick on HGTV, excuse me. We're HGTV. HGTV would want us to spin the show by saying we are the only people who know these secrets of the universe.
Yes.
And you have to come to this show to get the secrets of the universe. What we wanted to tell people was the opposite.
There's a lot of people out there who can help you and who know this information, who are all over the nation. And we just, we want to be like the dating game of this realm. So yeah, and also the other thing, I mean, there's a reason even Chip and Joanna left, right, and created their own network with a lot more freedom and their own contracts and lawyers and producers, because you have your own vision and you know what it is, and oftentimes like that kind of ceiling thing that we had just said, they would go, "That's great. Can we get it down to 30 seconds? Can we
and can we show like the carpets or like a paint? We've got this paint sponsor that just came in. We need to talk about paint now." So that's the kind of thing. We select our sponsors as opposed to vice versa, which is a very handy thing for us, that we're not famous enough that people are like, "Hey, Coca-Cola wants to give you like $300,000 to make your show." And we would be like, "Well,
very tempted.
We can't say no because we need money to make the show." That's why we wanted to reach out to the individuals and say, "Hey, we need your help," because if Home Depot comes to us and says, "We'll give you $500,000 to be the sole sponsor of the entire show," like, we have kids and we need to get health insurance. Like,
what is health insurance? That's a conversation.
Hopefully that's over by next year, right? Wouldn't that be great if that was
but speaking of health, that actually like takes us into the next thing that we're going to show, because in the development of the show, Corbett has the training. He is the scientific know-how. I have the filmmaker training and connections and have lived in that world for a long time. But I've also learned a lot about science along the way and how to translate it. And in this journey, I've also become a mom. And that has opened up my brain so much to the health of your home and how to even talk with other moms about it. So in every single episode, we make a point to have just me be on the camera and talk one-to-one to that parent, who is concerned that their daughter has asthma, and they wonder if it happens to do is connected to the hatch, the attic hatch that's right above the fan, that's right above their bed, because they didn't have asthma before they moved into this house, right? And so that's kind of one of those things that we're talking about too.
And so the beauty shots of our family is actually a big thing about the heart of the show too. We really feel strongly that that's an asset that can help to sell the science portion to normal people too, is like when they see the story of this little family that's just trying to make it. So here's this example.
We hit the road in our tiny lab when my oldest daughter was just 6 weeks, which meant her car seat was important. And I researched the safety features, of course, but I also started to wonder what these things were made of. I mean, our daughter was gonna spend hours in this car seat, which was going to heat up in a parked truck and release chemicals from that heat. Here I was, swaddling my daughter in organic cotton. So how could I get a car seat without considering the materials? Now, as we build a bigger house, what we bring into our home is equally important. And so, just like choosing a non-toxic car seat, there are lots of ways to educate yourself about these materials. And there's some companies that are even accepting the challenge ahead of regulation to make home furnishings and building materials safe for you and your family. And if you don't know where to start or what to consider, home diagnosis is a great place to begin. As we build this house, we'll keep coming back to indoor air quality. The important thing to remember is that what you bring into your home is what you'll be living with and breathing every day.
Do you feel it? You feel it in your heart?
Did you guys notice that our daughter is a mosquito magnet? She looks like she's got chicken pox. Oh man. Okay, so one other thing I wanted to add, by the way, is like, so Hap Haven is here, which is great. Hap is an important person for me, having learned from him. And it's also very handy to have people who are in these circles to be able to just call. Like, I've got the cell phone, I've got Brett's cell phone number, and he's the expert on kitchen exhaust. And so the night before we shot this most recent series about ventilation, largely it was like the headaches of home chem was episode 10. the healing your home chem is episode 11, and then the sun is the universal battery. So like a lot of ventilation talk about that.
Right.
And I wanted to make sure that I was perfectly clear on not just what is possible with kitchen exhaust, but what my kitchen exhaust that I installed in that house actually was doing. And so I just got on the phone with Brett, like he made time for me on a, Thursday morning or whatever. And those conversations result in actual things that will end up on television.
Yeah.
And that's what we also do with our Patreon supporters, is that we like go over the scripts the week before we shoot.
Yeah.
We read through all the scripts with our Patreon supporters, just say, hey, if you have any ideas, if you don't like anything, if you're like, hey, expand on that a little bit because I don't understand what you're talking about.
Right. Or if this really kind of scares you and makes you interested.
Let's do more of that. And by the way, that's another thing that we have found at the Home Performance Conference a couple of years ago. I don't know if it was Chicago necessarily, but when we were making the first season of the show, but it wasn't out yet. And people were like, oh, is this going to happen? I sat down next to John Tooley at lunch at the conference. And I was like, hey, John, I just wanted to tell you that the ideas that we've been talking about for a couple of years and how important it is to share this with normal people, we now are making a TV show and I want to scare the crap out of everybody. And he was like, yes, you want to hit their reptile brain. And I just thought, thank you. I've got the sanction of that. So like the reptile brain thing is we're trying to make the sex appeal of this, which is why the test tools, that's the sex appeal. So the test tools are a hero of the show. And then also the fear. And if you want to scare the pants off people, talk about how they might be poisoning their children. That's a much more powerful message to us than like, you might be hurting yourself by being in a nasty environment.
If your dog, your parents who are living in the base, like in the beautiful build out that you've made for them.
The innocence in your life, not you, because like we don't care about ourselves. Clearly, we smoke and we drink and we do drugs as well. We drive without a seatbelt sometimes.
Corbett does not at those things. But whatever.
So we're like doing all right on time, but I do want to hurry through this. So
let's jump into this.
So here's the thing. This is one of the things about ventilation, which we hear again and again, and we think that we have a pretty good answer for this. This is like 1 minute and 40 seconds of why your house needs to breathe. Makes no sense.
You might have to breathe, which implies that you don't want to build too airtight. This is completely wrong if you want to control home performance. Build tight and then ventilate right.
Here's the mistake we make if we depend on accidental air leakage through the cracks in a home. First, you can't control where the air your family breathes comes from or where it goes. You might be breathing polluted air from a crawl space, or you might be pushing warm, moist air into a cold building cavity where it'll condense and grow mold.
Second, a house that breathes through the cracks depends entirely on the weather outside to drive circulation. When it's very hot, cold, or windy out, you'll get way more accidental ventilation than you need, which makes it overly dry or humid inside. And when the weather is mild outside every spring and fall, that's when it gets really interesting.
Imagine you have a week of lukewarm weather with cloudy skies. If the temperature outside and inside is the same, then you'd get virtually no accidental ventilation at all. The whole goal of the indoors is to give us a refuge from the weather. So why would you want to depend on it for your accidental ventilation?
Plus, now more than ever, we know that when a builder hands over the keys and a family moves in, they need systems in place to control the indoor chemistry. Every time that family cooks or uses cleaning products, they can make the indoor air exponentially more polluted than outdoors.
So, aim for as much airtightness as you can get at home, and then get the right amount of fresh air from the right place with your ventilation system.
Bethany, would you please tell us how long we are allowed to go with this?
You are, we don't have any questions now, so you can keep cruising.
If I go over, I've got more video here than what we have in our hour, but
we will not cut you off. It doesn't
Great.
end. We won't end it right at the 60-minute mark.
I promise that what the things I am about to show you, we've got about 20 minutes left of video, and we can keep our like comments very short between them, is amazing. This, what I'm about to show here, is something that I had never even heard of was possible. And I guarantee it has never been on television before. And it is going to freak builders out everywhere. And I think it's going to start a lot of conversations with people who are going to be building homes.
Gird your loins.
So here we go.
This is our friend Landis Bennett. He has been in the building industry since the 70s and is also a wood scientist. So we've brought him out to our build to kind of torture my house.
Exactly. So what we do in the lab is we do water penetration tests, especially around your tape on your sheathing and the windows. And we do that by spraying water on it and pulling the differential pressure. So what we're going to do here is you're going to pull the blower door test.
Yeah.
You're going to pull the pressure on the inside and we're going to spray the outside of the building and we're going to look for leaks.
All of the sheathing, all of the
whole enclosure.
The wrap, all
Yeah.
the tapes.
Yeah, the tape, the seams, the windows, the doors, the whole enclosure. He can pull the blower door test pressure high enough to where we're simulating inclement weather, wind-driven rain. And this is a test I think that builders should consider that they can do on site. You don't have to go to a lab to do this.
But I think that this is where the anxiety becomes a reality that you can fix. It might sound like a nightmare to some people to have your anxieties become reality, but it's nice to know where the problems actually are and where you just think the problems are. We have the pressure washer running outside. I'm going to run the blower door to a much higher pressure than normal. We just ran the test, which is only to 50 pascals. I'm going to run it up to more than double that to start this test, 125 pascals. I can actually feel that in my ears, and you can hear the fan going. Now I've got my infrared camera. I'll be able to see the water as it's coming in when Landis is about to blast this thing. Here we go.
Right now, Landis is pressure washing my house, and I'm really hoping that it is watertight.
Not seeing any obvious water coming in, and just to make sure that we're doing this right, I'm going to go ahead and take this up to 1 inch of water column, which is 250 pascals. We're spraying pretty hard on the window, and what the blower door is able to do is pull the water in around all the things that might not agree with gravity. So we're actually pulling the water up and into the window too, to see if any of it comes out here. And the infrared can see things that our eyes can't see, but even with it, I can't really see any water. A little bit right here. Just to remind me of where we're going. You can see the blotches right up there. A little bit right up there. You can see there's a seam in the buck. So you can see it with your bare eyes, and you can also see it on the infrared right here. This is a seam going up the side, but we don't have a problem until right here. That is our problem. This is a hole that had a nail in it, but now it doesn't. So the blower door is pulling this door a little bit out of shape, and we can see that the top comes out. There's actually water popping through there. But again, number one, fiberglass door, not gonna rot. Number two, water will never get to this because 20-foot roof out over the back deck. So this is one place where my anxiety is confirmed, but I still feel good about myself because I know what I'm about to install. We're also testing the roof here. We have spots that you can see I marked out in orange paint already that were from when it rained naturally, and we fixed them. And of course, the whole thing about performance testing is it's before and after. So we tested it with rain, then we fixed it, and now I want to see if what I did actually worked. So after heaping all that abuse on our enclosure, using the blower door to simulate extreme weather, we got to 250 pascals. I'm a little bit curious and a little bit worried that maybe we did hurt the seal, that some of the tape that we put up came loose. So of course, there's only one way to find out. So we'll run it to 50 pascals. The number we had this morning was 300. And the number we have now is about 300. So we're still at 0.4 air changes per hour and 50. That means that we did not, in fact, hurt the house when we ran that test for so long under extreme pressure conditions. That makes me feel even better. Now that I know, even if a hurricane came through, I won't say a tornado, but if extreme weather comes through, it's not going to hurt the house, especially since we're going to add more and more layers to this. This is just a basic, fundamental test to see if we can move forward with the rest of the layers. All right. My brain's a little bit tired.
All right. That still gives me such a thrill. I hope you guys get off on that too. So cool. Okay. By the way, that was Landis's idea. Landis, the older guy that you saw in that, is one of the inventors of Zip System and Georgia Pacific Force Field, which is what the gray stuff that you see on our house. And by the way, he showed me the actual first ever installation of something that led to what became Force Field later. He's amazing.
And I think at the very end of that too, didn't you flip the fan and pop the?
Oh, I did. I flipped the fan around to pressurization mode, and we have a membrane on the roof, and it popped the membrane open. So I totally, it was.
We were filming. We caught it.
Yeah. So don't do that in case you're building one of those. So okay. So what I'm going to show you now is something that literally, except for with one exception, nobody has seen any of this footage, and that includes Grace actually.
Well, I was present.
She was present when it was shot, but she hasn't seen it in reviewing it. So I've got these are some interviews. First, we have Matt Reisinger. We have an episode all about the life of an actual contractor and how hard it is for them, because we want to be a cheerleader and an intimidator for both sides. The reason that we're here is partly because homeowners have been asking for cheap, fast work for decades. So of course we have cheap, fast, what do you think was going to happen? So we need to reformat what we're doing. So Matt's in here. Jim Bergman, who's an HVAC legend. We have Tom Phillips, who is from Habitat for Humanity, Michigan, who is also potentially one of the main reasons that Habitat for Humanity has pledged that they're going to build all high performance across the country starting in 2025, I think.
I think so. That's what he said.
Which means that affordable housing, that's Habitat for Humanity, will be always scientifically superior to the $1 million mansions down the street or on the other side of the tracks. And that's going to be fun to tell people on television.
It'll be interesting to see how that affects market rate.
So those are the first three. And then the real interesting stuff. And this is frankly something that has given me a new lease on this entire career. I would get bored. I'm going to be straight up with you. If I was just talking about vapor diffusion and thermodynamics and pressure for the next however many years. I can't see myself doing this until I'm, 80 years old, just talking about physics. Chemistry is so much more interesting when you can start expanding your mind to think about chemistry, and then microbiology. And the interviews that we've got at the end of this is a 15-minute chunk of interviews together. And I swear to God, I only picked really fascinating stuff to show you. So please hang in there for the whole thing. We're going to do questions. If anybody's here left after 15 minutes of this, then we'll take questions.
My relationship to testing is an interesting one because, when I first got into high performance construction, going on almost 20 years ago now, I remember my very first blower door test. And I thought I was building a good house at the time. And I got this kind of this unequivocal piece of paper back saying, wait a minute, this is anywhere near what I thought I was going to be. What do you mean? I have a hole in my building this size. Is that possible? I mean, I was there. It looked like a pretty good house to me. So then I started delving into, well, how do we build a tighter house? What maybe we should use spray foam. Maybe we should do this or that. And I remember getting again my test results back, specifically blower doors, and being like, what? I thought this was going to be a lot lower. Dang it. So then the next house I build, I'd do a couple things differently. Oh, it's got to be the problem. That's totally it. We're going to crush this one. You get it back. What? Dang it. I thought that was going to be better. And honestly, it's taken me a long time to get below 1 ACH 50 on my blower door. I mean, 15 years worth, frankly.
It's very interesting over the 30 years watching. We have a building science industry that has been slowly trying to creep into the HVAC industry, and there's been a lot of pushback because you got two groups that are one that's very focused on the science of what we do and one that's focused on the mechanics of what we do, and they don't always agree. because they don't think the same, because they've been taught for years how to fix things. So, there's people that are good mechanics and there's people that are good technicians. And what we have today is a lot of mechanics in the industry. And those are people that can hook up a flue pipe, that can hook up a thermostat, that can hook up the power wiring to your furnace, they can hook up the gas line. They're awesome mechanics. They solve all their problems with tools, screwdrivers, wrenches, gauges, but they're not necessarily good technicians. And technicians are different from mechanics. Technicians use technology to solve problems, and mechanics use tools. Even in our industry, when we talk about installers are typically considered the lower skill job because they're using the hand tools, mechanicals to getting everything hooked up, but they aren't technicians that come out and solve the problems.
Every year in Kalamazoo, Michigan, we had a partnership with the local home builders association. And we would let's build a house in 24 hours. We would start with a foundation because you're not going to watch concrete cure while you're, getting ready to go. We'd have the foundation poured and a little, rough landscaping. And we'd start at 7 o'clock in the morning, and 350 people roughly would be a part of this. And they had it down to the minute. I mean, you talk about a build schedule and you're looking at, it could be months and months, it could be years sometimes. This is 24 hours, and 8 o'clock in the morning, the next morning, we get our certificate of occupancy from the building inspector. And the only reason it's 8 o'clock, the house had been done, but he won't get up any early. He won't show up to work before 8 o'clock. And so, we'd wait till 8 o'clock to get our occupancy permit. And everybody says, oh, I would never want a house that was built in 24 hours. It's like there's got to be all kinds of flaws and shortcuts and everything else. And I was working with that affiliate as a volunteer for 20 years and then as an employee for about 5. And we never had more problems with those houses than we've had with any other houses. Remember, a lot of our houses are, built by volunteers. And so when you're trying to provide low-income housing, you look for ways of saving money. And one way is to use volunteer labor when you can get it.
It's important to appreciate that we have many, many, many chemicals in our indoor air. Fortunately, they're present at relatively low concentrations, and at these low concentrations, the majority of them are innocuous, but some of them can contribute to bad odors, and in some cases, they can contribute to ill health. The chemicals that are in indoor air, a number of these can react with one another. The products of this chemistry pose a problem. We're not as aware of the products of the indoor chemistry as we are of the original chemicals. The chemicals that come from outdoors, we have a sense of what they are. The chemicals that are present indoors because of the products we use or our furnishings or our materials. Again, we have a sense of what they are because ingredients are listed on product labels, or you can go to different websites and read what chemicals might be emitted by a new couch. You might be familiar with the flame retardants that are used in a couch or a personal computer. You might know something about the plasticizers that are used in your floor. But the mystery compounds are the compounds that result when pollutant A reacts with pollutant B to give something that isn't on your list of ingredients, that you can't read about when you go to the web to see what the flame retardant is. These chemicals that are a consequence of indoor chemistry, some of them can be quite reactive. Reactive chemicals are not a good thing in environments where you have human beings. Reactive chemicals can react with us with consequences that can be deleterious to our health.
I'll tell you one of my favorite stories going back to being a mountaineer in the mid-70s. Actually, I was on an expedition in India where America's leading young climber, Bruce Carson, fell through a cornice on a 23,000-foot summit to his death. And he was an early environmentalist, the first person to climb the walls in Yosemite without using pitons. People used to drive into the rock. And so in his memory, I wanted to do something for the environment, for the world. And I learned that the flame retardant that was used in kids' pajamas, this was the middle of the 70s, a chemical called brominated tris, was 10% of the weight of kids' pajamas. And when you looked at the structure, it didn't look good. And we found a little girl who had never worn tris pajamas. Her mom got her jammies in the UK, put her in the tris pajamas, collected her urine. The first morning, there were cancer-causing tris breakdown products in the little girl's urine. Every day she wore the jammies, the level went up. She stopped wearing them, the level went down. So that was pretty clear. You know, in America, chemicals that go into our mouths, foods, drugs, and pesticides are regulated. We might argue how well they're regulated, but there's serious regulation. But chemicals in pajamas and these tens of thousands of industrial chemicals really are not regulated at all, certainly not adequately regulated. So in any case, we found that tris was a mutagen. It changed DNA. And in those days, we wrote a lead article in Science magazine saying that it was a problem. We spoke on the 3 TV networks, which is how you reach everybody in America in a few days. And 3 months later, tris pajamas were not allowed to be sold in America. However, when brominated tris was removed, can you imagine what the substitute was?
It's a
Chlorinated tris. Same structure, same function, same toxicity. Also changed DNA, also shown to be cancer causing. And we wrote another science article, and chlorinated tris was removed from kids' jammies. And I didn't think any more about it. This was the mid 70s. And I went off mountain climbing, had a family, done many, many things. And then about 15 years ago now, I wanted to come back to science, and I learned that the same chlorinated tris we'd gotten out of kids' jammies was back in the nation's furniture and children's products. And unnecessary use of flame retardants is in foam plastic building insulation. They have to meet a test that's not a very good test. The reason, because foam is flammable, but it has building codes require it to be behind a thermal barrier. So the thermal barrier, like sheetrock, has to withstand flashover for 15 minutes. So by the time you burn through the sheetrock, you reach the insulation, and all the flame retardants do is make the fire more toxic. There's not a benefit. Nonetheless, there is a requirement, and we have worked very hard to change that requirement. It's been changed only in California for foam below the surface of the soil. And there's huge opposition from the flame retardant producers because it's a large market for them.
So the species that causes toxic black mold, deadly black mold, is a really mysterious species that we know very little about in nature. And one of the things we didn't understand about this species relative to its wild nature in houses is how it gets into houses in the first place. Because what one often sees is if you have flooding in an area, suddenly it's everywhere. And yet if you sample the air in a house, which we've done lots of times, it's very rare in the air in houses. And so the mystery in the literature for a long time, and there are plenty of mysteries about this fungus, and so it wasn't even the one that was focused on, was where is it coming from? How is it getting into a house? And how does it seem to know when a house has been flooded? And nobody really knew. And then Birgitte Andersen, who's here in Denmark, she was at the Danish Technical University when she did this work, she started to wonder if maybe what was happening was that it was actually lurking in the drywall, that when you bought new drywall, that it was already there. And longer story short, what she found was that in fact this is the case, at least in Europe, and almost certainly in the US, that a subset of drywall comes preloaded with several fungus species, which if your house never gets wet, they just sit there and they wait, and they're kind of sad that they don't have the things that they need, but they're hopeful. And then if your house floods, suddenly they encounter exactly the conditions they need, and they're waiting, and they grow like crazy. And so then the question becomes, how do you make drywall that is less likely to have these fungi in it in the first place? And what is it about the process of making drywall that sometimes introduces these fungi? And Birgit has done a little bit of work on this, but I would say it's fair to describe it as early days in our understanding. So is a spider a pest? Well, I don't think a spider is a pest in a house, but most of the time a spider in your house is doing you a service. Spider bites are extraordinarily rare. Neighbor bites, far more common. And so if you're worried about two things, your neighbor, far more dangerous. And so in that context, in terms of actual harm, your neighbor is a pest and the spider is beneficial. And so that boundary, I mean, I don't know who you live next to, but in broad terms.
I've never heard that. That's really excellent.
In a preschool, a kid is probably 1,000-fold more likely to be bitten by another kid relative to a spider. And there have been great tests done where if you take the most dangerous spider in North America, and if you rub its back, it will flee. If you hold it down, it will flee. If you hold it down twice, the odds that it bites start to go up. But if you rub the back of another kid, the odds that it bites are much higher. And so that's amusing in one sense, but in another sense, it betrays the extent to which what we welcome into our homes is really framed by our personal history, the culture to which we belong. And I think that's important because those perceptions change dramatically over time. And so if you think about what people were comfortable with 200 years ago in the US versus what they're comfortable with today, it's changed radically. And if we go back to the body, where your question started, we find ourselves in a kind of paradoxical situation in that people have become more aware that we depend on all these species that live on our bodies and in our bodies. And at the same time, we're spending more on chemicals that kill those species than ever before. And so we're aware we need these species, and we're fighting to kill them. And so somehow that's got to resolve. And it's not clear to me how it resolves yet. And we've probably gone in a worse direction in the context of COVID. And the other part that I think is really interesting there, if I just to add a little piece, is the question of where you end and where you begin. If you look at yourself in the mirror, has one answer. But if you use a different sense, so olfaction, so if you smell somebody, almost all the smells of someone are produced by the microbes that live on their body. So from the perspective of smell, the line between somebody's own body cells and the microbe cells is not just blurry, it doesn't exist. From the perspective of vision, it seems to be clearer, but in a way that clarity betrays us, I think.
All right. So there you have it.
Here we go. Stop the share.
Wait, no, I'm going to do this. I'm going to go like this. And I'm going to go like this. No, I'm just going to stop the share.
Let's just stop the share.
Okay, so I'm going to stop my share, which is that. And now you're just seeing us.
Yeah.
Thank you all. We'll take questions. And I do have the chat pane up, Bethany. So if you want to just, we can look through this. But thank you to everybody who's commenting. I'm really honored that Hap and Brett and Scott and Keith are all here. Like, these are really important people.
And to answer the
making of this
question on who does spider research, I'm pretty sure that is a popular research topic. You give a bunch of boys some spiders and girls some spiders, and they will research it.
Well, and also, so the question is, who does this spider research? Welcome to the Matrix. Like, everything that we have gone into in the chemistry of homes and the microbiology of homes is a rabbit hole. And you could literally spend the next 5,000 years being fascinated with the science of homes, as long as you don't get bogged down in thermodynamics and freaking roof ventilation. I'm sorry to anybody who presented on roof ventilation this conference, but like, when I want to talk about the science of homes or building science or home performance or whatever it is you want to call it, it's like, let's talk about something new that gets people really like interested.
Yeah.
And vapor diffusion is not that thing. Do not talk about that with normal people, please.
But there's a lot of really, I mean, honestly, the indoor chemistry environment is a whole a whole new frontier.
It's
And
amazing.
there's a lot of really smart, creative college and PhD students that are pursuing these topics in really fascinating ways.
And by the way, shout out to anybody who's watching this right now who is not a living legend that I've already named. Because one of the people that you saw interviewed just now, Jim Bergman, who is the HVAC guy, sat next to me at like this think tank, and he put his hand on my shoulder to make an example of me. And he was like, everybody just look at Corbett. When he first met me, he didn't know shit. And now look at him. And like, I just want to make sure that that's clear. Like, we didn't know anything about this until 2008. And we started, and like, I was an idiot. And by the way, I always, that's still a thing. Like, just admit you don't know stuff. It's okay. And so for those of you who are starting out, there is no barrier to entry. Like, we made our own cred. I have a degree in music, and Grace has a degree in musical theater. So this is how you do this, is if being married to somebody who's fanatical about doing all that stuff is very helpful too.
Yeah, but there's also a lot of really great mentors that you've had over the years, and trainers that we have flown you to be with, and amazing people that we have had on our YouTube channel that you can go and learn from. So again, please do go and just fall down the rabbit hole that is the Home Performance channel on YouTube.
And please consider giving as little as $5 a month. Like, all we really want is for all the people who are like, have their whole heart and their career based in home performance to give like $5 a month just to be part of the conversation, just so we can show you in a way that we don't even do with our full corporate sponsors, to be perfectly honest, but like little updates. I was looking at our YouTube channel, and like 5 videos get released in a week. One of them is public. 4 of them are privates for our Patreon followers. So, you can join at a level that's like a really important sustainer level, which is $100 a month.
Awesome.
We do not expect that. Yeah. That's amazing. But like $5 a month is not a lot. And it really makes a big difference to us, partly because of the money, and also partly because you're looking at the entire production company here.
Yeah.
It's us. And so we feel a little lonely sometimes.
Yeah.
And it's hard to just be like, oh yeah, we're responsible for telling, all these people sitting around watching TV about all of the correct things about. So it's like, it's really nice to have a team.
We actually do a hangout with our Patreons. You
Every
don't
month.
have to come, obviously, but it is lovely to have our supporters there and be encouraged. Because it's a family affair over here. And I mean, we've all been feeling like isolated in this pandemic. And it's joyful and challenging. And you need those things to keep going, especially as artists, because we're artists.
And just in case anybody is like concerned that we're getting rich off of this, anybody who might be jealous that we've got 5 million views and 30,000 subscribers on YouTube, we have made a total in 13 years from YouTube of $24,000 over 13 years. We make $685 per month from our 32 patrons.
Thank you very much.
This is a shoestring. I mean, I edit the show myself because we just don't have the money. Like, we got a bid for having a production company do the whole thing, and then we would just do the easy part, script it and act, and then that's it.
Yeah.
We can't afford that.
No.
So, this is like a guerrilla.
And if you have a company and you're interested in sponsoring, we have all kinds of levels that you can enter in, and you can also lead with. So this has been a real joy to be here with everybody. Just checking the panel once more for any more questions, but no.
The kids are not allowed in the stone house. The troll house is where Grace keeps all her gardening equipment. So it's like,
they haven't really found it yet.
They have. It's like, I mean, snakes might get in there. But anyway, it's like where we keep non-lethal garden instruments. I keep the lethal garden instruments in the workshop locked away, so we don't have anybody
very high up
accidentally coming in and borrowing things.
So
and Keith is pointing out that that I've come a long way, which is true. By the way, that was, I think, the visit where Keith told me that in his culture, where he comes from in the mountains of Carolinas, being naked is having no clothes on, but being naked is having no clothes on. And you're up to something, which I think is great. I still talk about that. Oh, we got a new Patreon. That's
Yay,
great. Let's see. All right. And Brett wants to point out that Corbett and Grace know shit. Thank you. I think you mean that we do know things. You guys are awesome. Bethany, if there's anything else to add. And by the way, thank you to Steve for commenting. That was really nice too. Steve Skodak.
Yeah, I think I would echo what Steve said, to thank you for being here and sharing your work with us, and for the work that you're doing, and making that really important connection of exposing people outside of our industry to home performance and building performance, and making that connection. So
awesome. Well, next year, hopefully we meet and you guys will all have clients who literally had the show come on while you're in their house using an infrared camera, and they're like, oh my gosh, you must be famous because you're doing the same thing. So we'll see you guys again next year, and please do feel free to tune in, between now and then. We're very available.
Awesome.
All right, cool. Thanks everybody. Thank you, Bethany.
Guys, thanks everyone for being here. We really appreciate it. We'll make this available on our recorded sessions as well for anyone who wasn't able to catch it.
Fantastic.
Nice.
All right, thanks guys.
Bye.